Good morning, people. Thank you for participating in the conversation here and your interest. Let's continue and move towards some practical issues. Okay. Um, Now, just again to be clear about the domain of effect of the kinds of things that we're discussing here, I think it's important to keep our um, discussion and expectations as far from the fanciful as we can. It's not necessary to imagine um, Harry Potter kind of silly wand waving or whatever here. In fact, illusions of those kinds of effects are, well, rather silly, fictitious, and to imagine um, influence of that kind of scale as even being possible is kind of contrary to our purposes here. But I think if we open our minds to recognize that there are a class of effects that we encounter all the time, some of those really quite mundane, that we can classify as, well, from our definition, magical effects, it's pretty easy, in fact, to, without any woo or stretch of imagination, understand how the things like this operate. A great example of magical effect would be um, very mundane and, in fact, problematic to modern science. That would be the all too famous placebo effect, where it's very easy to document that if you give people non-effectual medications, of course, that they believe to be effectual, many people will get a actual physical benefit from a non-effectual substance simply because of a magical effect. I mean, this is obvious, well documented, and something that has to be controlled for in studies because the effect can be significant. In fact, more significant often than actual bona fide drugs or other therapeutics. Um, and that should be interesting to us. I mean, this is precisely the kind of thing that we're discussing. Somehow, the act of believing that a particular um, pill, say, is beneficial somehow operates and is able to have a conversation at some level with the underlying substrate so that the underlying substrate then manifests a different health response. Um, yeah, physically, right? Okay, so like, I think that's about as far as I need to go to make a real case that these things work. Um, it's essential that we ask really intelligent questions about how and why they work and understand the mechanism so that we can utilize these kinds of interfaces to our own benefit and as much as possible avoid being injured by these influences when we want to avoid it. Now, of course, the placebo effect is interesting enough that it bears real study, and there is a lot of good scholarly study on the placebo effect, and circumstances that make it stronger and circumstances that make it ineffectual. Um, Obviously, it does beg the question of whether or not you could sit down and work yourself into some kind of headspace where you believe things strong enough that you could cure your own health um, problems, or perhaps even create other effects, say in the underlying substrate, that then provide different objective realities for you to experience. Um, the answer seems to be not very easily. Okay, I don't think that for most people they have the time, effort, or discipline to spend years working themselves up into kinds of beliefs and mental states that they know at some level are pure projections. At some point, you're going to have to forget that what you're trying to talk yourself into doing is talk yourself into something. I mean, it's pretty clear that the placebo effect works because the individual who takes the pill um, does, in fact, have confidence for some reason, often some transference of hierarchical authority from a doctor figure, that the pill is legitimate. Okay, so that it's already been past the filter of disbelief. There's been no necessity for there to be an effort on the part of some kind of mental gymnastics. And second of all, it appears that there's something very important about the actual swallowing of the pill. And from our point of view, that shouldn't be too surprising, because when you swallow the pill, you engage that internal primordial tube worm called your digestive system in the entire project. So there is, in reality, a connection and a conversation being had from your headspace, as well as a real experience of the tube worm that asks the headspace, hey, what is this we just ingested? And it gets the impression that it's beneficial, and then it acts accordingly, right? So certainly there is a mental attitude that is part of this, but there is a great deal of action and engagement among multiple tiers of being, not just cognitive but physical as well. This in conjunction has enough potency to, at multiple levels, well, change the reality of the experiential self, okay? Simple set of circumstances, but relatively clear and precisely what we need is an effective example of what magical practice aims to do, at least a great deal of the time. Okay, so let's expand our example, and let's say that we have a tribe somewhere where this particular tribe of people identify with bears as being some kind of totem animal that has characteristics that they wish to exemplify within their own character. And why not? Because bears are strong and they're survivors and they're kind of alpha predators and all the rest. So they're the kinds of things that might be nice to identify with if you want to be strong people. Okay, so like this wouldn't be crazy at all. But you're the bear clan, and you want to be sure that the individual members of your community, as much as possible, do in fact embody these bear-like characteristics that you hold in high regard. Okay. Well, obviously, it wouldn't be difficult nor even very novel for such a group of people to have a traditional ritual or a rite of passage for young people where they were to say have some period in their life where they needed to go out and hunt a bear and kill a bear and perhaps butcher the bear, make clothing of the bear's fur, and say eat the heart of the bear. Okay, right? I mean, from our point of view, obviously that's a magical practice at all levels. Okay, and it has engagement across many, many, many hypothetical tiers of existence. There's lots of possibility for engagement in the underlying substrate, okay, that gives rise to our experience of self. And there's tremendous investment, there's hazard, there's high emotional quality and content there, personally, socially, physically, viscerally, and even down to the point where fundamentally you actually eat the bear, engaging all sorts of underlying mechanisms in this particular rite of passage. And I think any of us, given the chance to contemplate it, if we were asked whether or not this would actually have a positive outcome in terms of helping a young person feel more bear-like and have the benefit of feeling stronger, more capable, and the rest, I think most of us would say that, yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that at the end of the day you're going to feel more like a bear than not if you go through this entire exercise of this particular rite of passage or ritual. I mean, it is, after all, a massive, gigantic, highly loaded opportunity for a placebo effect, let's just say, okay, where it's quite likely that the experience of engaging in this will have very significant outcomes in the actual objective experience of the individual who undertakes it. Okay? Is that really a stretch? Well, I mean, I'm doubtful. I think it would happen to anybody who went through it. But there's questions we should ask. Now, again, to kind of harken back to our last conversation about whether or not you can do communion with Orange Crush and Twinkies. Let's say that in the this tribe, over time, they've gotten kind of lazy about their bear ritual, and rather than a situation in which you needed to, I don't know, build a spear and nap the spearhead and like hunt the bear at some particular time of the year up one particular valley that you could only go into if you were doing the ritual hunting of bear. Okay. Rather than that, you could basically go anytime you wanted, and you could ride, you know, a quad doing it. And rather than building a spear, you could just go buy a 300 Weatherby Ultra Mag with a big scope, and you could blast the bear, and you could take it to the butcher, right? And then the butcher would clean up and dress the bear and make you a nice bear coat. You didn't have to actually do any of that yourself. All right, let's say that you went it that way, okay? Like, do you think that the bear ritual would be as effective? And the answer is no, of course not, because you are not investing the engagement. You're not engaging in the conversation with the primordial underlying substrate by going about it the half-assed route. Because remember, this is a magical worldview. It's first person. The magic is in the doing, right? The benefit comes from the swallowing of the pill, not the pill, right? If one has lost that connection with magical practice and they've moved into the religious, then it starts to be easily held that the magic is in the bear, and somehow all you have to do is eat the bear and you will get the benefit. But that would not be the attitude of most historic magical practitioners. It's in the practice that the magic exists, not the object. So obviously, the more engaged you are in the process, the more significant the effect you're going to get out of the exercise. And considering you are looking at this exercise, which is a big deal anyway, um, for the effect, an intelligent practitioner goes out of their way to, in every way they can, be as engaged and as personally invested in the outcome as possible. Because if you do that, understanding what it is you're trying to do, then the effect that you're going to get is larger. So why go about it any other way? So that's useful to give us guidance. So let's say that we are budding practitioners here and we want to make use of this very real mechanism to create effects in our own life, okay? Whatever that might be. And it's important that, especially as one gets going with messing with this business, that you don't try to shoot very high, because if you are reaching for effects that are beyond what you currently think are realistic, well, they're not going to work, okay? Because you're going to poison the entire process from the start with some kind of doubt. So I would say be sure that when you start to dabble with this material, keep it within the realm of things that you can credibly hold are probably likely. Again, you don't have to make anything up here, right? Like, we are certain that things like the placebo effect do work. If you keep it within that kind of scale, you shouldn't have any necessary reason as to expect that you are doomed to failure, that this is complete baloney. It's not. It's a scientifically verifiable reality. And if you keep it modest, well, then there you go. But let's just say that you have a quality in your experience that you'd either like to amplify or diminish, right? It could be something just as mundane as seeking a higher level of physical fitness. That would be very easy. Um, well, from wanting to do that, some kind of invoking that fitness into your life is what magical practice is going to be about. Just like if you were trying to invoke bareness into your life, it's the same. Now, the difference between the bear ritual and how many people go about fitness is the bear ritual is deliberately created from the start to have many, many, many multiple layers of engagement. It's more than just going to the gym, right? It's trying to create opportunities for conversation with the underlying substrate as broadly as possible, right? And if one were to approach, say, becoming physically fit with the same kind of attitude, that you were as much as possible going to try to create a set of circumstances, whatever that might look like for you, depending on the symbolism that seems, resonant to you. Well, I think we could probably guess that your attempts to become more physically fit would be better the more engaged you are with it at as many levels of engagement as you can recognize for yourself that should be part of the conversation, right? So, like, this isn't crazy at all. But um, what makes it interesting is that over time, an individual who starts to practice making an attempt at expanding the conversation to these multiple tiers of conversation not keeping it not just in the cognitive, not just in the physical, but as many or the rest of that as you can. Well, it becomes easier to have that conversation as you go along, so you get stronger effects more readily and with less effort as one develops the ability to do so. So there's real benefit there. Now, there is an element here that needs to be brought completely forward. It seems like it should be self-evident, but it appears that it isn't, so I'll just be very direct about it. Any of these effects or things, anything magical, you have to do it for yourself. Okay? Other people can't do it for you, including so-called experts. All right? And when you find cultures where they have these traditions that are still intact, even if there are individuals in those cultures that claim to be somehow advanced or even professional practitioners of such, um, very often they keep that hidden, okay? Because anybody that understands how these mechanisms work know that if your interest is actually in a given individual's benefit, let's say that we're back in the bear village here, and there's a young guy who needs to do his bear ritual, and he's kind of nervous about it. Um, if I come in there as some professional shaman that waves a bunch of smoke around or whatever and convince him so that he can do it, um, in a very forward manner as some kind of expert purveyor or priest of magic. Well, I might convince him to do it, but I have actually crippled his efforts because he will necessarily have less investment in the outcome than if he had done it by himself, right? Because I did much of the heavy lifting for him as some kind of priest or practitioner, right? So people that take this kind of stuff seriously um, generally have an ethic of keeping it quiet. And you would see that there might be, say again in the bear culture, that there might be a particular canoe builder who was unusually adept with this. And that canoe builder may make an attempt to um, nudge things a little shamanically, let's say, by creating circumstances that this reluctant young guy is encountering um, that really, without his knowledge, set up a cascade of events that leads to he finding in himself the confidence to take on the bear ritual. Might work that way. But there is very much a culture of keeping this stuff hidden and a responsible attitude among people who do this to camouflage their expertise in that which is often very mundane. Okay, um, you read a lot of that in the literature where very, very powerful, very magic characters show up camouflaged as very, very ordinary people who, through just creating circumstances, um, then allow organically all sorts of things to occur. All right. And that would be the case here too. Um, if you recognize that you need to create this knowledge and this capacity to have these internal conversations for yourself, be very skeptical of external influences that want to give you any help, because if they were good at it, they wouldn't do it. Because if one were to do so, of course, um, then they, by necessity, make the effect of your doing it less. Does that make any sense? It's really important not to commingle religious concepts with magical concepts. Magical concepts are always going to be experiential in first person, and that the magic happens in the doing, between the individual doing it and the fundamental substrate. It occurs there. Religion has appeals to external authority, expertise, priesthood classes, and often the implicit offer of being able to offload a significant part of the effort to some other person who, for a fee, blows some smoke around, but actually denies you the experience of doing these things for yourself. Okay? Be very, very, very wary of the priest. Okay? You will have to do this for yourself, but it's worth dabbling in, let's just say. So I thought I would share some of that with you this morning, and get ready. It's starting to be quite cold here. We're kind of hunkering down for winter. We've got our first freezes, and I got to go work in the shipyard. Hope this is helpful, people. Cheers. Looking forward to hearing your comments.